Thanks, Nikki. Gosh, isn't it complicated, all of this? There's the thing that strikes me for the last hour, actually. Hopefully I'll make things slightly easier, actually. I was going to start with the fact that television is so yesterday. But in truth, actually, both Nigel and Jamie, I think, have probably quashed that already. Certainly since I've worked in television, which is quite a long time, I suppose that there's been a death knell against television, particularly with the dawn of the digital age. The 30-second spot's going to die. Nobody watches live television anymore. Well, that's not really true. And I hope that something you glean today is a little bit more perspective about that, really. And particularly when it comes to understanding just the scale of television. Yes, we hear loads about Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, etc. Television, total television reaches 100% of the UK population. Commercial television about 97%, and about 110 hours a month of viewed by, television. And in fact, that's not necessarily something that's always happened. Television viewing is still growing. And actually, since, say, 2008, 20 minutes each day have been added to the total viewership. So you may wonder who watches 4 hours of television a day. I wish I did, actually. But something that's also a myth, and particularly when iPlayer in particular was launched, as mentioned, is that people don't watch live television anymore. They do. In fact, nearly 90% of TV viewing is viewed as live. And actually, on top of that, another 5% is viewed on the same day as live. And on the right-hand side are digital homes that have a digital TV recorder. Even when you've got the technology, 84% of their viewing in that home is still live. Now, that's not to say that all the things that Nigel talked about aren't going to happen in the future. And video on demand in particular is fascinating and will no doubt grow. I'd be surprised if we put up charts like this in even 18 months' time. But I'm actually going to big up Sky, because I like Sky. I've used what is a fairly live example for this, because the technology and the numbers change so rapidly, as you can imagine. So I've tried to bring it to life a little bit with a programme that was aired in September. I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Pilkington. He had a show in September, and actually it did incredibly well. So linear viewing, which is normal telly to you and I, normal telly viewing plus Sky Plus in 1 week delivered a viewership of 2.5 million. Pretty good numbers for Sky. But on top of that, there are 100,000 downloads on Sky On Demand, on internet-enabled televisions, and then a further 100,000 views on laptop, mobile, and tablet from Sky Go. And yet, despite all this, television still offers you better value for money year on year. In fact, television has never been cheaper. And that's not just in terms of targeting adults, but also adults and adults 16 to 34s. A pretty busy chart, actually. The reason why all of these things are on one chart is probably because two things. I could talk for the next hour about everything here. And secondly, I was concerned that Nigel would steal most of the information. A couple of things to note. Screens are getting much bigger. 16% of the UK population has a TV over 43 inches. I find that quite incredible. Something that is happening in the UK, Nigel mentioned it's changing in the States and presumably will go in the same direction. But the home and the TV in the main room is actually now the focus of the whole household. It used to be, I don't know, a few years ago that most kids had a separate television and they watched TV elsewhere. But at the moment, it seems that very large television, where families watch 4 hours a day, it is very much the centre of the home in the UK currently. There are more ways to catch up, which we've touched on. There's certainly improved targeting from AdSmart. There's lots of new ad formats available. So there's all sorts of video on demand. There's product placement, sponsorship, ad fund. There's apps generated from television programs, there's social media websites dedicated to TV stations. In fact, everything's got an awful lot bigger and better lately. Even program content, you may want to say at this point, no, it's all rubbish. Even program content has got better. In fact, I don't know how many of you watched Breaking Bad. It's just finished in the US. It is actually the highest rated TV show ever. That surprised me, actually, although I've not seen it. It's bad. And just when you thought that HD was enough in your living room, Ultra HD is launching next year. The biggest thing, though, that's happening in everybody's living room is multi-screening. And in fact, these numbers from Ofcom are out of date the minute they go into print, but these are from Jan to June this year. And they use terminology that is media meshing and media stacking, which I find interesting because I've never heard of them before, but that's Ofcom. So just to give you an idea, 78% of the population have a laptop, half the population has a smartphone, 25% owns a tablet. It's pretty much expected, in fact, even Google told us at the last seminar that the tablet ownership is likely to double by the end of this Christmas, so wouldn't be surprised at that at all. So people are second screening and using their devices whilst they're watching the television. 53% of people multi-screen, but it's not actually all bad news for TV because, and this is media meshing by the way, 25% of that activity is related to the content being watched. And indeed, I saw some figures for Twitter recently that said 40% of tweets in the peak time is about television. So it's still very vital. And not surprising, and again, to add some scale, the numbers of people watching TV, the number of people using internet and social networking at the same time. TV viewing, as you're not surprised at all, peaks at 9 o'clock, but also so do the other functions too. So what does all this mean? It's actually quite difficult to navigate from a TV buying perspective, I suppose. There's an enormous extension across channels to actually, say, extend each program beyond its, say, 1 hour slot. So in the case of this is TOWIE, The Only Way is Essex. You can now have, I don't know, product endorsement, there's product placement, it's available across multi-platforms, there are licensing deals to be had. There's a whole thing around social networking with it, as you would expect with a target audience. So from a viewer perspective, there are lots of ways to engage with television and this particular program. And the challenge for advertisers is to actually join that space. And it's not as easy as it seems. And I think sometimes when you see really good examples of it, the reason why they stand out is because it's a very difficult piece to navigate. But what does all that mean then for how technology is changing TV advertising? So new platforms have really evolved the way in which traditional DR TV used to work. And there used to be two very distinct elements to television. There was brand advertising, and there was DR TV advertising. They were quite separate. I'm sure if you think back in your minds, those of you who are old enough to, would think, do you know what, yeah, I can probably distinguish it pretty much between what went out in daytime, maybe what goes out in peak. And then a few years ago, somebody realized that there was something called brand response, which is partly where these things meet in the middle. To put that more into a media strategy kind of thinking, there will always be brand advertising. There's not many ways you could advertise a perfume, for example, until we have smell-o-vision or something. It's all about the environment, it's about creating fame, awareness, it's about prime time, glossy programming. That's how you build the fame of a brand. There will always be DRTV. And a lot of our charity clients will always use that as a segment. It will be effective. There are different ways of reaching the audience. There are different calls to action. But essentially, the notion of driving response in low-interest programming, where it's cost-effective, will always exist. But what's really growing is brand response. And that's not just for DR clients, That's for brand clients too. So all of a sudden there's this space in the middle where an advertiser has to engage, has to build awareness, but also at the same time has to drive response. And that's an area that's becoming increasingly interesting. But don't take my word for it. This is Mark Runnicus, who is the chair of the DMA Awards. I'll give you a second to read that, actually. Essentially, it's pretty much saying the same thing. So all of a sudden, brands are having to be more response-focused, and with traditional DR advertisers are having to think more about engagement. And we're fortunate at MC&C to have 2 clients as finalists in the DMA Awards. We have both UNICEF and Which. And just looking at some of the company that we're keeping in our categories, Virgin, O2 Be More Dog, IKEA Small Spaces, you can see, and bear in mind this is the DMA Awards, I think Range Rover in there, there's some really big clients that no doubt we'll beat anyway. I want to share with you. I suppose it's interesting to me because the car market historically has been about building brands, certainly on TV. And in fact, the only way to ever have a call to action as part of your media strategy was usually in press. There wasn't really a way to do it on television. It was done by local dealers. So to be able to do something on this level with a car advertiser, to completely join up their mobile capability with a TV campaign, I find quite interesting. I'm going to share it with you. You may have seen it. You may have Shazammed it already, but just in case you haven't.
Your turn.
The new Jaguar F-Type. Your turn.
It's clever, isn't it? And you can actually stay with that app. You can pause it, you can pick it up later, you can continue watching your program and decide later on to put your test drive or whatever. So, the old rules of DRTV, some of you may be familiar with these. Essentially, the call to action was usually telephone only, which meant there were limitations in terms of call center capacity. Most advertising took place Monday to Friday when the call centers were open, and they were pretty much during the day. It was off-peak, it was low cost, it was low interest. Charity, insurance, and handy household appliances generally filled the space.
Introducing Ceracraft ceramic pans, new from JML. The tough non-stick ceramic means you can cook without using extra fat for healthy cooking. The forged aluminium and steel base heats to over 280 degrees and gives you even cooking for food bursting with flavor, and virtually nothing sticks or scratches. Plus, even a tough mess like this just wipes clean. Transform your cooking with Ceracraft ceramic pans. Now available from only $19.99 at Asda, Argos, The Range and Wilko's.
I'm sure they're probably still on air, actually, so I'm not caused offence, I hope. So they were the old rules of DRTV, essentially. The new rules, really with the advancement of technology, the lines have been blurred between brand and response activity, and response, encouraging a lot more brand response. And what I mean by that is say something like Jackpot Joy, for example, in the bingo sector, they're behaving more like brands. I'm sure you really want to see a bingo commercial. I'm going to share one anyway. Apologies to any Scotsmen in the room. I've just realised that.
Which of these three is a true Scotsman? Pick now at jackpotjoy.com and you could win a share of our £250,000 prize giveaway. Get online and start picking. It won't cost you a penny.
The point about showing you that really is the sense that Jackpot Joy have spent millions on television this year. Barbara Windsor, they probably pay an enormous amount to. In fact, it's rumoured, I don't know if it's true, but she has actually earned more from Jackpot Joy than she ever did in EastEnders. And I have to say at this point that a member of my team thought it was Dolly Parton yesterday. I am sorry. I'd want to, I suppose, impress upon you that what they're doing in a bigger space. They're buying peak airtime, for example. 45% of their TV impacts are going out in prime time. And that puts them in a whole different space. So what traditionally could be a DR advertiser is behaving like a brand. There are now more response paths available, and they can be much more engaging. And I'll share with you some of our findings within our charity sector. Essentially, call to action has changed completely. Charities changed completely in the last few years. And Nikki, I think at the very last seminar, told us at length about the importance of SMS. Online is also growing, and particularly both SMS and online really do start to peak. The effects of their response rates are much higher when you get to the evenings, which is something very much to bear in mind when planning. Now, this data comes from our bespoke art system, which matches back all media events to response. It's also a very good reminder of the fact that no matter what clever stuff you're doing, if you can't measure it, then there's very little point to it. And particularly this chart, I think, explains the fact that one size does not fit all. We have a range of charity clients here where donation from online, for example, is much greater from client A to client G. What is apparent, though, in the second chart is that in every example, our online donation is greater for online than anything else. So donations, the lifetime value of those donors that come from online is greater. They're more likely, well, they're going to be younger, most likely, and they're more prosperous. And engagement is really important, and this is something I hope actually the next time we see you, that you've all done something really creative in this space. An example from Argos, I don't know if any of you have seen that recently, big blockbuster programs on ITV1. It's really quite brave, actually. They bought specific breaks in all the blockbuster programs. They're asking you to tweet a gift for Santa. So during the course of the ad breaks, they'll tell you such and such, tweet it in, this idea for a gift for Santa. What's interesting about it is they're using a live Twitter feed in live television. Maybe something to think about for the future. In terms of the new rules, the third rule is about online media. It's more important than ever to be able to harvest the effects of television in search, and search in particular. And there was a campaign last year from Hotwire, which won a ThinkBox award, not surprisingly actually looking at this. You can see absolute symmetry between the amount of TV ratings that went direct to site or from PPC got unique quotes. And I think one of the reasons it's actually such looks like such a good graph is because Hotwire had never advertised in the UK before, so it was a brand that came out of nowhere. But the symmetry on that is really important. We've got similar brands in the agency. Now, I know the clarity isn't quite the same, but you get the gist. So this is all types of either direct traffic or organic traffic going to site for one of our charity clients. And you can see a clear demarcation, I think, of the peaks in the TV impacts. Similarly, we have a gambling client. Again, when the TV started, you can very much see the number of search impacts. So search is really important. So what are the new rules? Well, the lines are blurred, response paths can be more engaging. We do need the data in order to understand that response path. Online media, especially search, harvest response effectively with TV as a catalyst. So what do those new roles mean? In terms of TV planning, well, I suppose all of media usage, as always, we need to have an integrated campaign, but more especially that integration needs to be understood within the digital format. The whole spectrum of television can be used, not just daytime anymore, not just weekday anymore, but prime peak programming, favourite programmes, relevancy, etc. And selected spots in peak can actually drive interaction as effectively as daytime. And I've got an example at the end that I hope proves that point. So what does all that mean? Essentially, the way in which advertisers spend has changed quite considerably actually in the last 10 years. You'll note that things like, I don't know, the car industry and the beer industry used to dominate television when I first joined it. Both dwindled quite a bit. Retail isn't as big as you'd think, certainly looking at all the Christmas ads and the John Lewis, etc. Makes up only 10% of total ad revenue. The areas that are really growing are leisure and tourism, and that's partly due to e-commerce. It's also partly due to the growth of the gambling sector since 2006. But it does change the way in which television is used. So to summarise, there are more viewers, they're watching on bigger screens, they're watching it live, they're watching it on more platforms. There's much greater engagement, more ways to interact. TV advertising offers fantastic value. There's a growth in brand response and using television differently. There's more ways, certainly, for customers to interact. It's up to us to get into that space and measure that response. TV and digital planning needs to be integrated, and media planning needs to affect the new rules. I'm going to leave you with something that we did earlier this year for a client called UNICEF. As an agency, we've often done contextual advertising, new spots for ActionAid, for example, or buying really specific programming, and it's worked very well. The UNICEF campaign was pretty much centred around the news. Their campaign was about Syria and the refugee crisis. When we had the opportunity to buy into a spot on Channel 4 in the programme Dispatches about Syria, we jumped at it, and thankfully the client was brave enough to sign off on it. Even thinking about it gives me goosebumps, I have to say, and the response that it gave this charity completely surprised us all. It even surpassed all of Nikki's expectations, I think. So apologies for this quite long clip. I'll leave it with you.
The new arrivals are putting pressure on dwindling supplies of fuel, medicine and food.
على قدر المستطاع وهناك بيوت في هذه القرية نأتي إلى صاحبها أعطنا المفتاح لكي نسكن عائلة وغير ذلك فلا نأمن. لماذا يا أخوة الإسلام؟
Most of these people have witnessed the violence of civil war. None are prepared for what happens next.
I must share with you the desperate plight of Syria's children. 500,000 have fled the violence, 2 million more remain in Syria. All are in urgent need. No one thought it would get this bad, and it's getting worse. Children have lost their homes and their childhoods. Some have been shot at, others abused, others have watched family members die. I can't bear to think about it happening to my children. It's heartbreaking. UNICEF is in Syria and the surrounding countries doing all we can to protect children. But there's so many and supplies are running low. These children need food, water and clothing, but we simply don't have enough funds to reach everyone, and so we appeal for your help. There is nothing that you or I wouldn't do to protect our own children, but Syria's children need our help, and they need it now. Please text CHILD to 70007 to give £3. Every donation counts. Thank you.